This is ManePear, a combat master, Flame's best friend, and I believe that he is about to change the Civil War forever. But to understand why, you need to understand something that most people who joined the server during the Civil War have never actually seen, because ManePear has been gone long enough that newer players only know the name, but they don't know that speed is his specialty. Anyways, let's start with the Invisible Mafia arc, when they controlled the entire server with thousands of members, Diamond Team elites with maces, and Clownpeers on their side. ManePear was living alone in a treehouse space. The Mafia massacred civilizations, imprisoned thousands of players, and made the whole server do what they said. They never touched ManePear's treehouse, and that was not because they did not know he existed, it was because sending players there would basically be a death mission. After he left the main server and became an assassin, he built up a combined bounty of 9,000 diamonds from Bat and the Law put together, not for destroying factions or killing leaders, just for existing and doing what he wanted. Both of the server's most powerful forces had him as a top target, and neither one ever collected it. That is who ManePear is, and with Parrot having lost the Civil War, there's no better time than right now for him to make his grand return. To understand the first connection, you need to know who Wemmbu actually is, because Wemmbu did not become the server's most powerful weapon by accident. Every single thing Wemmbu knows about fighting came from ManePear directly, because ManePear built him from the ground up. Speed 2 combat is ManePear's specialty, and he passed it straight to Wemmbu. Elytra Macing, the fighting style that made Wemmbu one of the most feared players in this entire war. ManePear taught him the mechanics and the approach from scratch. The way Wemmbu manages his inventory, the way he thinks about fights, the idea that the winner of a fight is whoever wins and not whoever fought cleanly, all of that came from ManePear. He even gave Wemmbu his first mace and taught him the specific tricks that a mace fighter needs to know. So when Wemmbu broke Jubilee's helmet at Steampunk City and forced him to retreat, that was ManePear's training running against the Civil War's most feared fighter. When Wemmbu held his own against Flamefrags in the cave before Jaden stepped in, that was ManePear's lessons doing the work. And when Wemmbu dropped arbor strikes on both sides at Capital City, maced 6 elite players including both faction leaders in the same fight, and walked away. That completely reckless and honor-free way of fighting is ManePear's way of thinking fully alive in the most destructive solo performance the server has ever seen. Wemmbu is ManePear's greatest student and possibly his only truly successful one, which makes what ManePear said when he left so important. The last thing he told Wemmbu was 2 words: lost cause. And that is not just an insult, because those 2 words became the engine of Wembu's entire story since then. The obsession with proving he was the strongest player on the server, the increasingly reckless behavior, the willingness to take on multiple elite players at the same time, all of it connects back to a man who trained him completely, walked away and told him he would never amount to anything. ManePear wanted a focused, controlled, careful fighter, but what he got instead was someone who absorbed the honor, does not matter lesson, while completely ignoring the follow the plan part. And the result is a player who fights without any limits but also without any coordination around him. Alone he is extraordinary, but inside any structure he is chaos, which is exactly what the Civil War has been watching play out this whole time. Now look at where Wemmbu actually is right now. He wiped out both sides of the Civil War at Capital City at the same time. He was betrayed by Arachnid and dropped into an unknown location at the bottom of a cave. And he is, for the first time in his entire war, completely without a faction and without anyone telling him what to do. If ManePear hears what Wemmbu did at Capital City, and he will hear about it because everyone heard about it, his reaction to those 2 words, lost cause, becomes the most important emotional question in this war right now, because Wemmbu did not just prove he was not a lost cause, he proved it the loudest possible way in front of the entire server, against both faction leaders at the same time. Whether ManePear looks like that and feels like he was wrong, or looks at it and decides that power without control is exactly what he was afraid of, changes everything about where Wemmbu goes from here. The second connection is the one that actually brings ManePear back, and it is much more direct than the Wemmbu situation because it comes with a promise already attached. ManePear told Flamefrags one thing when they made up after everything that happened between them, that they would always be brothers and he would always be there for him. And every single time ManePear has broken his decision to stay away from the server, it has been because of Flame, not because of politics or money or any war happening around them. Just because of Flame. When Flame found him after a year away and needed spear training, ManePear agreed, even though he wanted to be left alone. When Flame got captured by the law, ManePear came back for him even though he had already said he was leaving for good. When Flame needed help taking down the law compound, ManePear stayed and helped even though working with others goes against everything he prefers. The pattern is the same every single time and it is simple. ManePear will not get involved in wars or server politics, but he will show up when Flame genuinely needs him. So look at what Flame's situation actually is right now and ask yourself whether it meets that condition. Lomedy is gone. The person Flame joined Syndicast for and the only reason he was ever in this war, left to go back to his farms after admitting the whole thing was a mistake from the start. Flame has no faction, no base, and no clear next move, because he quietly turned on Syndicast by helping Parrot at the Northern Council through what looked like an attack but was actually a private conversation, which means Syndicast sees him as a traitor now, while Parrot has no formal agreement with him yet. He has a promised rematch with Wemmbu that has not happened. He is completely alone for the first time in his entire arc, with no one to follow and no relationship left to build his decisions around. The last time Parrot was this alone, he went looking for ManePear and found a man in a cave who almost attacked him on sight, and ManePear came back anyway. The situation right now is worse than it was then because the server is in the middle of its biggest war. Flame has made enemies on multiple sides, and the only relationship he has left that still means something is the promise ManePear made when they last saw each other. ManePear is coming back, and the question is what happens when he gets there, because there are a few different ways this plays out depending on what Flame decides and what ManePear finds. The most direct path is the simplest one. ManePear finds Flame, because finding people is what he does for work as an assassin and speed is his specialty. Koki. The most direct path is the simplest one. ManePear finds Flame because finding people is what he does for work as an assassin, and speed is his specialty. Then he shows up off the capital city while Flame is operating alone with no orders and no direction, and makes his version of an offer the way he always does. Whatever Flame decides become the decision both of them act on, because that is how it has always worked between them, with ManePear following Flame's lead even though he is the more dangerous of the two, because the whole relationship is built on brotherhood, rather than who is stronger. If Flame decides to join Parrot's side properly, ManePear follows and Parrot gains something he has absolutely no other way of getting, which is the person who built Wembu's entire fighting style from scratch. ManePear knows every habit Wembu developed during training, every gap in this game that never got fixed, every pattern he falls back on when the fight gets tight, because he created those habits himself. Parrot trying to deal with Wemmbu while ManePear providing that kind of inside knowledge is a completely different situation from Parrot facing Wemmbu with no idea what is coming. If Flame decides the Wemmbu rematch comes first, having ManePear in his corner changes that fight completely. The cave fight between Flame and Wemmbu was close until Jaden joined in and shifted it. Flame with ManePear's specific knowledge about Wembu's patterns, going up against a Wembu who is currently unsteady and angry after Arachnid's betrayal is not the same fight that happened in the caves, and whoever wins that rematch settles something that has been sitting unfinished since the bridge confrontation at the start of this war. Because it is the only real question about individual power that this civil war has not answered yet. The third option is the one ManePear would actually want, which is that he and Flame just operate together outside any faction and answer to nobody. Not Parrot, not Syndicast, not Null, just two players moving through the war and making their own decisions about what to go and what to do. This is how ManePear has always preferred to work, and Flame might actually want that too, after everything that happened with Syndicast and the law and every other faction structure he has trusted and had blow up in his face. A Flame who is done answering to factions combined with a ManePear who has never answered to anyone is something that neither side of this war has any plan for, because you cannot plan around players who do not have a schedule or a base or a chain of command to target. There's also the question of Arachnid directly, because ManePear hunts rich players for work, and Arachnid just became someone with both a professional and personal reason to be on that list. As a target, Arachnid runs the most resource heavy operation outside the main factions. That is exactly the kind of player ManePear goes after. On a personal level, Arachnid took Wemmbu, the student ManePear called a lost cause but still spent an entire season training, used him as a tool for the whole civil war, and then tried to kill him the moment he was no longer useful. ManePear walking away from Wemmbu is one thing, someone else using him up and throwing him away is a different thing entirely, and ManePear is not the kind of person who sees no difference between the two. The Civil War's fighting style has been built around 3 things the whole time: maces for big damage hits, elytras for moving fast, and bows for range. Every major battle has been fought inside that framework, and every elite fighter has built their approach around it, which means every elite fighter is trained against opponents who operate inside it. ManePear does not operate inside it because he uses a spear, a weapon he was the first player to master on the server, and one that has tricks nobody else has had time to figure out yet. ManePear trained the most powerful weapon in this war from nothing. He shaped the strongest solo fighter in this war into what he is today. He is the only person on the server who understands Wemmbu. He made a promise to the one person whose situation right now demands that promise be kept, and he has a weapon that the entire civil war has been fighting without ever having to face: the spear. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.